Welcome into the best seat in the house. You are on the front row for the Utah Jazz. I'm your host, Holly Rowe, and we are hot off the trade deadline. So we're so excited to have GM Justin Zanik and Jay Z. The trade deadline is always kind of fascinating because it's just one of many levers you can pull to kind of get the roster, get the youth, get the direction of this team set. How did you approach the trade deadline this year?
First of all, thanks for having me. Wonderful to be here. Um, the deadline, it looks different every year, and it's kind of twofold. One, as you said, it's just one of many levers that we can pull to look at opportunities to improve our club. Sometimes that means immediately on the court. Sometimes that means assets in the future. And with where our team is right now, is an extremely young team that's developing on the court. There are multiple opportunities to sort of add to our asset base. Those are the ones that were presented to us. We're always looking for opportunities to improve immediately on the court, and those type of impact players that were within our timeline and gettable just didn't present, those opportunities didn't present themselves during this trade deadline. So the trade deadline for us and our staff, that starts 3 months before, 4 months, like even at the beginning of the season. Evaluating your team, looking at things trying to project what could possibly be there, and then preparing for any of those things that come up. The deadline, it is truly a deadline league, Holly. I prefer, if there's a deal available that makes sense for us, to do it early. I think I'm in the minority on that because you see all these deals flying on Wednesday and Thursday, the day before and the day of the deadline, which we did participate too. So, but some of those things that come up, especially late, it's the first time you're hearing about that because teams finally decide, or they're waiting for how their team performs. We've kind of known what our path was going to be this year. But there are some teams that, maybe exceeded expectations and then they're looking to improve immediately, or a lot of teams this year have not lived up to expectations. And so maybe what they originally thought in October of what their team was and how it looks now in end of January, early February is different, and they have to pivot. And so we just have to be prepared for all of those possibilities when a team calls and says, hey, would you do A for B? That you no longer have the luxury of time to, a few days to go study and think and talk. We've already had those conversations, some of it a little bit hypothetically, but if this type of value comes to us or this type of player is available to us, then we can immediately pull the trigger if we want to do it.
When you're talking, I have this vision of this giant NBA chessboard, but not everybody's pieces are out on the board until the last second. And so you're like, wait, does this move? That's really hard, I would think, in a time constraint. But you did make some early moves, which I thought was, what you're saying is, hey, let's be proactive and move early. So one of the first moves was sending your least favorable first round draft pick in 2025. And you got something back for that. Tell us kind of the thinking in that first big move.
So, one of the things in terms of negotiations with other teams is trying to be perceptive of what that other team and what their situation is, because all 30 teams are in different situations with the cap, with their asset base, with the players, the age of the players, their timeline. So really studying other teams of what they may need and then how we can help. Now, it's not being a good Samaritan this way. It's more of like, if we can be of benefit to another team that benefits us. And in that particular case with Phoenix, they had been extremely aggressive over the last 2 years of trying to put together a team immediately. They didn't have any first round picks other than one that's pushed out into 2031, which is a very, very valuable pick, but it didn't satisfy a lot of their immediate concerns or being able to add immediate talent. And it was also one asset. It was literally the only thing they had left. They had swapped out every other first round pick. They didn't really have that many second round picks. Being in the second apron really restricts abilities to move around and acquire players or trade because they can't aggregate players in the second apron. So we actually started talking to them, I don't know, maybe even 2 or 3 months beforehand about just the concept of us consolidating some of our picks. You know, obviously over the last 2 years, we've acquired quite a few, with the intent of, you know, as many swings as we can at the draft. I think you've heard us say that, or bites at the apple, or whatever. One of our philosophies, as you guys know, has been to take as many swings as possible with how young our team is, and in this, you know, trying to create this championship window and win for a long time. But there's also the quality of those swings. So my first love was baseball. I grew up as a baseball player, and there, you know, sort of the analogy is there's a different approach to the plate when you're, you know, up 3-0 in the count as opposed to down 0-2. You're down 0-2, you're just trying to put something in play and hit a single. And that's kind of what the picks that we traded to Phoenix represent. They were the least favorable of 3 picks in 25, 27, and 29. So none of those picks had any chance to be the number 1 pick. And most likely, you know, those picks are going to end up in the 20s. And we traded those for an unprotected 2031 Phoenix pick, where I don't know necessarily what's going to happen with Phoenix 6 years from now. If I did, I would quit this job and open a casino. But what it does is, what it represents on the market is a fully unprotected possibility at the number 1 pick, depending on how Phoenix grows. The thing with Phoenix, you know, with what they've decided to do, they're trying to win it in the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. But with where the rest of their situation is, they don't control their own pick until, well, actually now they don't. After this trade, they have first round picks, but they're not picks of their own where they could decide to completely rebuild or anything else. They have to rely on another team's performance or 2 or 3 other teams' performance and taking the least favorable of those. But what it served a purpose for them was that they now have more things to trade to try to maneuver with their current team, or let's say their time horizon over the next couple years. And for us, it gives us something with huge trade value. I can't tell you if we're going to actually select that pick in 2031 or not. It just opens up a whole different set of possibilities for us. So it just made sense for both teams.
Yeah, I think it's so smart because, you know, you look at the age of their roster and when are they going to have to start to retool, and, you know, you try to project out what they're doing, but then the chance at the first round draft pick, you know, the number 1 draft pick, that's huge for the Utah Jazz organization. So this seems like a really smart situation.
I think the other part for us, I mean, Phoenix is a good organization. They're going to figure it out. They obviously, Matt Ishby has committed every resource to that team. But what it helps us too is that I look at my job as a steward for the organization. So I don't know if I'm going to be here in 6 years, but I do know that this was in the best interest of the Utah Jazz. And because we already had multiple picks in 25, 27, and 29, to now add multiple picks in 2031, because we have our own as well, that it extends this ability where, you know, when we're good here pretty soon, that we can help sustain it with picks that go on, that we made these good decisions 5 or 6 years ago that benefit the club in a huge way in 5 or 6 years from now.
Yeah, it's this magnificent crystal ball, and I think you deserve so much respect because it's really hard to do and predict. But I think you're right, is that gives you a swing at a home run type of pick. To go back to your baseball analogy. All right, I want to turn the table. I'm going to jump over to something different because I don't want our listeners to be like, all right, we get it, picks, you know, like whatever. I want to go back to something you said about taking swings in the draft, because some of the swings that you have taken in the draft are paying off big dividends right now. I want to go to Isaiah Collier. I think he's someone that you probably knew, fans, you know, us in the media. I don't know that we knew. I mean, he's in double-digit scoring 8 of his last 9 games, 3 games of double-digit assists. Like, I think he is blossoming into something very special. What are you seeing that you're like, okay, our crystal ball was pretty darn good on this young man?
So we see these guys starting as early as 15 and 16 years old. And, I mean, a year and a half ago from now, he was projected as a top 2 or 3 player in his high school class, and I think he actually finished number one recruiting, the number one rated player in his high school class. What you've seen a lot in college now, in the one and done era, is these highly rated guys going to a school, and it's a new situation. They're there 6-7 months. Sometimes, that school or that program and the choice just doesn't allow those guys to shine in the ways that they could, or they don't have enough time to adjust. You've seen multiple cases. I think that was something with Isaiah at USC, where he had an injury in the middle, getting connected with his teammates, a young group that they had, and they didn't have as much success on the court as, I think, Isaiah probably would have hoped, or the coaching staff, and what their season was supposed to be like. So I think sometimes, like, the most recent performance can affect scouts' decisions. For us, we try to see that Isaiah has dominated his age group all the way up through high school. He had an already NBA-ready body. He loves to pass, and I think once we've gotten him here and kind of helped him adjust, one of the best things about him is he knows what's going on the court at all times, which is an exceptional quality for a 20-year-old playing against men every night. Now, he has the body to hold up on that, and he's got mental toughness, but he also has a desire to make his teammates better. He still has obviously some work to do on the offensive end, which he will attack this summer with our programs, and I'm excited for him. But to show this much prowess this early in what I think is the hardest position to learn how to play in the NBA as a true, like, pass-first point guard is exceptional. Now, you're still going to see rough moments. You see some turnovers. You're going to see it, but it's going to be from. It's not going to. Those turnovers aren't going to happen over a lack of effort. Or he's always trying to make a play, and he's learning the difference between, the home run pass that looks great, and then just the simple one that, his teammates can handle, and learning how to play at different pace, because he's got this great speed. I love it when he pushes in transition. It's fun to watch. He's already one of the few guys in the league that does not need a screen because of his speed and explosiveness along with his body. So he's just got some really good tools, and he's a great kid and loves to work. So we've had a blast with him. He's been fun.
Yeah, I had a chance to sit down and visit with him last week, and I was blown away. Like, he wants to be great. And the other thing you're talking about is sometimes it takes time, but what I've seen with him, he feels it and he sees it, which then you refine the skill set. But feeling it is a hard quality to attain, and I think you guys really saw that in him.
Yeah, I also think that with how our team's constructed right now, he's earned his minutes, but also every rep that you get, the NBA game is just completely different than college or high school, or it's not easy. You're dealing with world-class athletes every night, especially at the guard position, guys that you have to guard every night. And you have to, the games come fast and furious. I mean, we've already played 50-plus games right now. That's more than he's ever played outside of maybe AAU in the summer when they used to play 3 games a day, and they were 30-minute games, 32-minute games. So he's done reasonably well not hitting that rookie wall that we talk about, just the amount of games. But I do think the All-Star break will help all of our guys here in a couple days.
Right. It helps everybody. Before we pop back to the trade deadline, just briefly touch on Walker, because, we see statistically, maybe his numbers aren't that drastically different. I see such a huge difference in his mentality and his confidence. What have you noticed, or what are you the most pleased with Walker Kessler's growth this season?
So a lot of I totally agree with you, Holly. The thing I'm most impressed with Walker is he took coaching last year, struggling maybe with some injuries and knickknacks, and not being able to get to the next game or the next play. He's extremely hard on himself. He wants to be great, and he's been able to really be able to get past bad things quickly. It's still a work in progress, but that all started for his work in the summer, where he got stronger, he got bigger, and I think that came with confidence. He really worked on some of the things that he knew to be a really good player for his teammates and to really help them is not only just the shot blocking, which is a unique and special skill for him, but his screening and his rebounding and his one unique skill that he didn't use all the time was his ability to change ends very quickly with how big he is. And so what he's demonstrated this year is just way more consistent play, night to night, play to play in terms of his effort. And it is one thing for young players, not only just young centers like Walker, to learn how hard you need to play in the NBA. I mean, think about it. Coming up to all of these guys, high school through college, they're the best player on the court. Like
yeah, they could take
it's
plays off.
easy. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's easy
take
for
plays
them.
off. Yeah.
And then you get stuck in in the top 450 players in the world, and even the 12th, 13th, 14th guys are playing their butts off, and how hard they play, especially veteran guys. And I think, rookies first 2-3 years in the league that you learn like, oh, I have to be able to, one, have the cardio and capacity to play at that level if I want to play a lot of minutes to prepare your body. And then three, just the mental focus to do that play to play. You're talking about, 100 possessions, roughly 90 to 100 possessions on each team. So 90 defensive possessions, 90 offensive possessions. And you're not going to play all of those, but you're going to play, if you're playing 30 minutes, you're playing 2/3 of it. And so that, what that takes out of your body, I mean, a lot of guys can do that for a game, right? It's, can you do it for 82? And then as you build a team, can you do that for almost 110? And those last 20, 25 games in the playoffs, if you have a chance to get there and advance, those are the most tough, mentally and physically draining games that you will ever play. And we're preparing our team for that. And so these lessons every game this year is great for them to learn. And I think Walker's taken those lessons and really taken a step.
Talking about that center position, and that did involve some of the trades I wanted to get to. You were able to accrue multiple first or future second round picks with trades with the Clippers, the Lakers. Can you explain to fans why those picks are so important?
Sure. So we had all these, premium, high level, unprotected first round picks that we've managed to acquire through previous trades. One thing that we hadn't done in terms of the amount of picks that we have were in our second round, like sort of our second round cabinet. We only had, going into the deadline, we only had our own in 29, 30, and 31. We just had 3. And while they're pushed out and pretty valuable for second round picks, if you've noticed over the trade deadlines and even in the summers, the speed and volume of what second round picks of what you can go get, or it helps you do smaller deals or things around the edges. If there's another analogy, it's like we had a bunch of $100 bills, but we didn't have 20s. And if we're trading them to another team, like, they don't have change. So right. This allows us to kind of break up some other things and gives us flexibility in multiple years to where if there's a smaller deal or be able to put something over the top in terms of a tiebreaker or something, we have, a few more of those. We went from 3 to 8. Which is good. And we actually have 2 this year in 25.
Yeah, I love your analogies. You're crushing it with the analogies today because, like, you do need change. And here's why. The luxury tax is getting more difficult. People don't want to be in that range because you're going to pay too much. So getting under the salary cap, I think, is more valuable than it's ever been. Do you think that's fair? And that's why you need change in deals to navigate the salary cap.
Yeah, I mean, going from just luxury tax and having, one big payment, what they've done now with the CBA, with the apron, the first apron and now the second apron, which, are levels above the luxury tax threshold, is that they take tools away. So you get in the second apron and you're there for, 2 years, your first round pick 7 years from now gets frozen. You can't aggregate. Meaning you can't take 2 smaller contracts to take 1 bigger contract. You're not allowed to do that. You can't take on more money than what you're trading out. So once you're in it, you can't use your mid-level exception. You only have minimums to use. It gets very, very difficult. So, you have to be able to help other teams to be able to take advantage of things that are good for you, and having more tools. And right now, where we are in a young team, it makes no sense to be in the luxury tax. At some point, we will. Ryan's unbelievable about giving us resources to build the best team possible, but we also want to be realistic of where having this flexibility allows us to kind of, when we want to push the pedal down and really go, meaning that we have a critical mass of players that we think can be part of our core for a long time and help us add a top, more top end players, which is what we need. Whether that's through the draft, through trades, we have sort of that currency to be able to go get that done.
Well explained. Okay, last thing I wanted to hit you on trade deadline was final move the team made. It was a 5-team trade, a lot of different layers to this, but you got players, draft assets, and cash. We ended up getting KJ Martin here in Utah. Okay, so this makes me feel so old because it was like yesterday I was covering his dad Kenyon at Cincinnati with Bob Huggins and that great story. So this is so fun for me because I just love, we've played against him for years. Utah has played against him and I'm like, okay, he is good. What excites you about KJ? I think he is an exciting young player.
Yeah, I mean he's still very young. He's 24, but this is actually his 5th season already in the NBA. Very good athlete, an explosive one like his dad. He's not 6'9" like his dad, but he's got the ability to guard. He does have a work ethic. I do think he can be a very good defender, and he's an improved shooter. So I think in the NBA these days, or fans or media, they think that these guys should just immediately improve, and if they don't, or they're different paths to the NBA, if it doesn't happen immediately, that they think that they can't play. I think KJ is a guy who, when he got to the league, he was able to play a little bit early because he was on a rebuilding team in Houston, but be able to stick around because of his athleticism and his work ethic. And now he's had time to continue to work on his shooting and be able to be a little bit more of an offensive threat. And that shows in the development of it. He's only 24. Like, we've taken guys that were 19 and got them good. We've taken guys that are 24 or 27 or 28 and gotten them better. Over multiple seasons and multiple years with many different guys. So we're excited to add him. He brings another level of athleticism that we need, and another wing wing defender that you never can have too many of on an NBA team. So, he has not played since December 23rd, I believe, because he had a stress reaction in his foot. He was just getting ready to get back on the court when he got traded from Philadelphia to Detroit. And then obviously, coming to us, that was, he's been off probably 6-7 days. So we got him in here now. He'll be with us, get him ready, and then we'll take the All-Star break to ramp him up. And I think you'll see a little bit of him once we get back from break.
Going against him, things that have stood out to me is he's a willing defender. You talked about wing defense, which is always vital. But then he plays hard. Sometimes you think, oh, your dad was an NBA guy, you could be an entitled type of kid. He plays hard. He's hungry. Is that something you've noticed?
He's not spoiled. He wants to make a name for himself. He's got a work ethic. He plays hard. You can be around in the NBA for a long time if you play as hard as you can, be a great teammate, be good on defense. The offense will come. Like, with that work ethic, you're going to get better. And so he's a good example of that for other young players in the league, that once you get here as a way and a recipe of how to stay.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. Okay, takeaway from the trade deadline league wide. Happy where the Jazz ended up. Tell me final thoughts before we let you get out of here.
Yeah, I think it was a good one for us. I mean, we were able to take advantage of the opportunities that were presented to us. This is really the first trade deadline of the full effects of the first and second apron. So I think there was some skepticism around the league of actually how many deals would get done. I think this trade deadline put that notion to rest, that there were a ton of things flying all over. I do think that you're going to see, sort of the theme of this one was that if you were a high level, let's call it high salary primary player, and you got moved, more than likely it would take multiple teams to get people to destinations. And then you saw on the other side, sort of deals that like what we did with acquiring assets. I think the thing that you saw that was probably a little more absent was players that are making, let's say, the mid-level and above, but aren't primary players, but good role players or good guys that could help in the playoffs on something, anything basically above 15 million and years left on your deal, meaning that you weren't an expiring contract. Those were harder to move because of the restriction on the apron and those things. I think you'll see those types of players, you'll see more movement in the summer during that trade season. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I think the number one takeaway is I don't know that I understood first and second aprons. So I think you've educated at least me and hopefully our listeners. Sure. It's complicated, but as ever, you're able to break that down into an easily understandable thing. So I appreciate that. All right. And then before I let you get out of here, final thing about just the roster right now. We've talked about this is a market that has to improve through the draft. The young pieces that you've been able to acquire overall, where are you pleased with the roster and the development of this young team as we head into the All-Star break?
Yeah, I can't give it coach and his staff, Coach Hardy, I can't give him enough credit in terms of how he's been able to manage through the season and coach these guys. It's also a credit to our players that not only are they good guys, they have high character, and I think you've seen, other than the very beginning of the season, that their effort, the results may not be pretty sometimes, but their effort overall has been good, that they play hard. What you have to look at is you have to look at it over the course of a season and the course of a summer and into next season. Development isn't linear. You're going to see some, great highlights and great moments, and then you're going to see some not so good moments. And what's important for our guys to understand is being able to move on to the next game and adjust and try to improve. And for a large part, I think you've seen that. They're not going to all develop at the same rate or, in the same skill sets, but you're seeing flashes from each one. And some of them may be more obvious next year as they get settled, as they're a little farther away. And some of them you're seeing an immediate impact now, where fans and us can see this makes sense. Like, he's a guy that could fill this role as we build towards a championship level team.
Great job. I think you have one of the hardest jobs in the world. I know it's just basketball, but your crystal ball has to be all knowing, all seeing, and you do a wonderful job. So grateful to have you, Jay-Z. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Holly.